Hello, fellow Movie Crusaders, and welcome to our latest episode. My name is Sean Wasserkrug. Sorry it's been a little bit. I've been recovering from a very bad cold, and it's been very hard to talk for long periods of time without going into coughing fits. You probably have seen on a previous episode with Brian Michaels and myself, I think we were talking about our fall preview. I was going into major coughing fits through that, and I just didn't want to do that to you guys because it's very annoying. It's very loud on a microphone. So I've been kind of holding off, waiting for myself to get better before I dropped all these reviews, because I have 9 movies that I've seen over this time, and it's been kind of hard to not want to review these when you're constantly coughing your lungs out. But on this particular episode, we're going to do another mass review drop of 5 movies that are not nearly as high-end as the 4 other films I'm going to have videos for coming out here shortly, but thus wanted you to still know what my thoughts were of them. The following films are Dead for a Dollar, which is on video on demand and in select theaters. We've got The Luckiest Girl Alive, which is on Netflix, Mr. Hannigan's Phone, also on Netflix, Hellraiser on Hulu, and The Curse of Bridge Hollow, also on Netflix. First things first, we'll go with Dead for a Dollar. This was a movie that recently just popped up on a trailer for Brian and myself, and based off the cast, we were really intrigued by it, but we were also very hesitant because it looked like a Western that was kind of not very budget heavy, and it doesn't mean that we look down on films that don't look like there's a lot of money put into them, but it also kind of gave that feeling of almost like a made-for-TV movie or a straight-to-DVD kind of film, even though the cast looks great. I mean, you got some great actors in this film, which is what intrigued Brian and I to check it out. I mean, we got Christoph Waltz in this film, Rachel Brosnahan from The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, you got Willem Dafoe, Benjamin Bratt, Hamish Linklater. 5 actors that I actually really enjoy in almost everything that they're in. The story follows Christoph Waltz's character, Max Borland. He's basically a bounty hunter. I think this is like the 2nd or 3rd film now that Waltz has played a bounty hunter. And basically, the movie starts with him going and talking to Joe Cribbins, played by Willem Dafoe, who basically said that when he gets out of prison, he's going to hunt down Max and kill him. But in the meantime, Max gets hired by Hamish Linklater's character, Martin Kidd, to hunt down and find his wife, who was kidnapped by Elijah Jones, played by Brandon Scott. Basically, what originally had happened was that she didn't want to be with Martin anymore, and she left with her lover. But he told Max that she was kidnapped, and thus that's where the story really lies. You also have this gang, the Vargas gang, led by Benjamin Bratt's character, I think it's Tiberio Vargas. So you have a bunch of little miniature subplots going on, but the main plot is Max and his buddy basically going down and trying to find Rachel and Elijah. Visually, I agree with what Brian said about the trailer. It's not visually the best looking Western. There's some shots, excuse me, there's some shots that definitely look very generic, very saving the budget for probably paying off the cast, and there's certain shots that just feel very kind of almost old school Hollywood, like everything was done on a soundstage and maybe some areas on location, but not necessarily anything that's really eye-catching or great in terms of cinematography. Cast-wise, everyone is really solid in their jobs. Christoph Waltz is always fantastic. Rachel Brosnahan, I mean, I love her. It was nice to see her in a role that's not like Maisel, so it was nice to see her in a different kind of role. She's fine in the film, but the script doesn't really do a whole lot to give her much more character than just coming in, talking to Christoph Waltz and saying, I'm this way, or this is, you don't know what's going on, or blah, 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 and all this kind of stuff, but it doesn't really, she delivers the lines well, but it doesn't do a good enough job, at least until the 3rd act, to really kind of elevate her character past this one tagline. Willem Dafoe, he's actually just out there just kind of doing Willem Dafoe things, which, that's fine. Like, Willem Dafoe's allowed to go do Willem Dafoe things, and you're going to enjoy watching it. Hamish Linklater, I love him as an actor. He gets little moments here and there to kind of do some things, but not enough to really elevate his performance up to a top tier status with everybody else. But honestly, the plot is rather slow. It's rather dragging, and it's kind of a boring film. With having such a great cast around you, there's not really a whole lot going on. It's just walking around or riding around and just talking, and then scene ends, and then more talking, and scene ends, and then more talking. They try to add a shootout at the end of the film, but even that feels very bare bones and very kind of just thrown together to have some action in the film and not a whole lot else, because I think even the people who were shooting the film were like, this is rather boring. But nonetheless, performance-wise, I think everyone does a great job. It's, there's no standout stellar performances, but everyone basically did what they were paid to do. So for me, is this one that I would recommend watching? No, probably not. If you're fans of any of these actors, I mean, check it out for that, but I don't expect you guys to be going in and watching Dead for a Dollar and going, this is one of the best westerns I've ever seen. It's definitely not the worst by any means, but it's just a movie that basically is average at best. It's not a movie I would ever rewatch again. It's not a movie I would say go out of your way to check out, but if you like these actors, you may want to see it just to see them on the big screen, because you haven't seen Christoph Waltz in a while, and Hamish Linklater doesn't do a whole lot of movies, and like I said, Rachel Brosnahan, she mainly does Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, so it'd be nice to see her in something else. And of course, Benjamin Bratt's always a welcome to see after a while, and Willem Dafoe, like I said, Willem Dafoe. So for me, I'm going to give Dead for a Dollar a 56%. Next, we're going to go with Luckiest Girl Alive. This is, excuse me, this is a movie that went on Netflix, and I didn't really quite know what to expect from the trailer. It had some Gone Girl kind of vibes about, Mila Kunis's character, Annie, or Tiff-Annie. Basically that, she's getting everything she's ever wanted. She's worked hard. She's getting the job she wants. She's got the rich boyfriend. She's about to get married, but there's something that happens in her past that is coming back to bite her, and it's basically her world crumbling down around her based off of the events of her past. And that's all we really know based off of that trailer. So it was intriguing enough for me to check out and figure out what was going on and what we were going to see, because I really like Mila Kunis, and I think that just like Zac Efron, I said in the Greatest Beer Run review, I think she's better than a lot of people give her credit for, and I think she just needs certain films to help elevate her status behind, besides being Jackie from That 70s Show or Meg from Family Guy. And with Luckiest Girl Alive, this movie lives and dies on Mila Kunis' performance. I'm not going to give away what the thing in the past is, because I think it's actually a very strong story element, and I think it's actually very intriguing. And when I found out what it actually was, it immediately locked me into the film. The negative I have about Luckiest Girl Alive is it does, kind of like with Dead for a Dollar, it does take a little bit to get going, because when you're watching current day version of basically Mila Kunis' actual part in the film, for the first hour of the film, you're basically watching her kind of internal monologuing, saying things in her mind that she wants to say outright but can't, and kind of just putting up a front. Her fiance, played by Finn Wittrock, who plays Luke, I've never been the biggest fan of him. Maybe we'll know him from American Horror Story. I mean, he's a guy who looks good, but I don't think his performances are really up to par. And even in this, I don't think it's that great. You got Connie Britton, who plays her mother, Dina. There's obviously, issues with them. And I love Connie Britton, but when she plays these kind of characters, which is annoying and cringy, she plays them incredibly well, but it also makes me not want to watch her on screen. And this first hour, a lot of it is kind of watching Mila Kunis and her fiance and her mother and all this kind of stuff, having her just kind of go through everything and kind of just keep putting up this front as the world around her starts to kind of crumble down. And throughout the film, you're kind of, one big problem is that, they're about to get married, Annie and Luke, and you keep wondering why. They don't seem to like each other. They don't seem to, love each other. They force these scenes in where they act like a fun couple, but then they're at each other's throats 2 minutes later. And a lot of the time, I'm just wondering, why are these two characters together? I don't buy their relationship. I don't buy that they love each other, except for the fact that they're just with each other because the script says so. what saves this movie and what makes this movie interesting and intriguing and why I kept pursuing it after that first hour is the flashbacks to the past with the younger cast. Shaira Aurelia, I'm probably saying that wrong, who plays young Annie or young Tiffany. I think she actually does a solid job, and an actor who I honestly normally hate the hell out of. Not a fan of this guy at all, but I loved him in this movie, is Thomas Barbuska? I'm probably saying that wrong. If you see his picture, you've seen him in a lot of things. He basically plays kind of the annoying brat redhead kid, or he plays a bully or anything like that, but he plays Arthur in this film, and he basically plays the friend to Annie in the past. And I actually really enjoyed his performance in this film overall. Every time he was on screen, it just brought kind of a levity and more realism to the characters of everyone around him, especially young Annie. And when you start to see where the script's going and where the inevitable plot points are hitting to this big thing that happened in the past, it starts to become more intriguing. And once Mila Kunis's older Annie finally decides, I'm taking ownership of what's going on, I'm going to force the narrative, and I'm going to take charge and not constantly play someone who is constantly talked about but doesn't actually stand up for herself, and I'm going to actually do that, the movie does a complete 180, and it starts to become intriguing and interesting, and you just can't wait to see what's going to happen next in the past and in the present. And Mila Kunis definitely ups the stakes in her acting performance and actually does an incredibly solid job, to the point where at the end of the film, I was enthralled in what Mila Kunis was doing through the rest of the film and with what was actually going on in the past, to, by the end of the film, actually really appreciating and enjoying everything that we had to offer in Luckiest Girl Alive. I think it's a powerful performance by Mila Kunis, and I think seeing the whole film as a whole, going back to that first hour, her performance there makes more sense at that point, which of course it does. That on a second rewatch, it probably wouldn't be as annoying or as bad in the first hour as it was in the first half. And I know what people are saying, you shouldn't have to watch a movie again to appreciate the film the first time, but I do feel like her performance in the first hour is hindered by you not knowing what was going on in the second half, and when that second half does come around, it does kind of make more sense to why her character is the way she is, and I think Mila Kunis does a great job. Is this movie, like Greatest Beer Run Ever, going to elevate her status like Zac Efron's? Probably not, but it's a step in the right direction to give people to look at Mila Kunis in a different light. I actually thought it was a really good film. I actually would recommend this movie. I think it's a very powerful story, especially by the time you get to the end message of the overall story for Mila Kunis's Annie character. The rest of the cast around her, Scoot McNairy's in it. He's not given enough to really be of anything, great, but I actually really enjoy him as an actor. Justine Lupe, she plays Nell, her friend. I liked her. Jennifer Beals plays her boss. I actually liked her in the film as well. But ultimately, the past is better than the present, but once the events of the past actually do happen, Mila Kunis does bring a strong performance that can elevate her maybe to another level in Hollywood and maybe get looked at for better roles. So I'm going to give Luckiest Girl Alive a 72%. Next, we're going to go with Mr. Hannigan's Phone. This is a film that's based off of a Stephen King short story. Basically, the general plot is, when Mr. Hannigan dies, Craig, the teen who befriended him and did odd jobs for him, puts his smartphone in his pocket before his burial. When the lonely youth sends his dead friend a message, he is shocked to get a returned text. Now, the plot of that sounds incredibly intriguing. It sounds like a very Stephen King-esque, kind of almost haunted ghost storyline. You got Craig, played by Jaden Martell. Many people know him from It Chapter 1 and 2 and Knives Out. Donald Sutherland plays Mr. Hannigan. And when you watch these two together, it's intriguing. It's very well acted between these two leads. And it's kind of going through this whole, like, Craig goes and he reads a book to Mr. Hannigan. They have a conversation. A couple scenes happen. He goes back and reads some more, which can be a very boring, dry thing. But then the introduction to cell phones and smartphones come into play. And you start to see kind of the world open up a little bit more for Mr. Hannigan and Craig. And then, you get to the inevitable point where Mr. Harrigan dies, because it's in the trailer, it's in the plot summary, and you start to get to the point where it starts to feel like a Stephen King film, but it never gets out of first gear. You are waiting for it to excel past the point that we see in the trailer, to go to higher heights and get to an actual, horror story, and it never goes past that point. Literally, if you watch the trailer, you've seen the movie. And if you think it's going to get more exciting past that point, you're going to be sadly mistaken. It just kind of plots along for an hour and 50-some minutes until the movie inevitably ends. And by the time it's over, you're just like, that was it? Was there never an end point to this besides it just going to this point? Because I was expecting more stuff to happen. I expected more from a Stephen King book, or Stephen King story of all things. I expected it to reach a certain horror level and a certain thing, and ultimately it just kind of did nothing. I'm not saying the performances of the two leads are bad. They were actually really good. I do think the actor who plays the bully, Kenny, Cyrus Arnold, I've never liked him in any performances, so throwing him in as a bully, I guess, okay. But every time I see him on screen, I'm just immediately kind of checked out because I'm just not a fan of his work. But Jaden Martell, I think, does a solid job. Donald Sutherland does a solid job. But the script itself is lacking of any punch, any excitement, anything that really elevates this movie past what the actual trailer gives you. So it's definitely not something I would recommend. It's a, it's a Netflix film. Let's just say that. It's a Netflix film. You put it on, and after about an hour 40, hour 50 minutes, you're like, well, that was a waste of time. And that's basically what Mr. Hannigan's Phone is. I'm going to give Mr. Hannigan's Phone a 43%. Next, we're going to go to Hellraiser on Hulu. Now, I will admit, I am not a Hellraiser fan, but I frankly haven't. I think I've only maybe watched the first or second one, and I haven't watched the whole series. But I've just never been a fan of Pinhead or anything like that, or the Cenobites or anything like that. So I wasn't even going to watch this movie. But after Hulu's Hellraiser came out, the reviews were strong. And people were saying, this is actually really good, you should check it out. And so, me being sick and sitting at home, I decided to pop it in and give it a watch. And like I said, not the biggest Hellraiser fan. I don't really care about the mythology. I don't really care about the lore of the Cenobites or Pinhead. But I was going to give this movie a fair shake as just what it was, which was, to me, a standalone Hellraiser film. Don't think about any of the past stuff. Just watch this movie for what it is. And that is a new take on Clive Barker's horror classic. And I didn't dislike the movie, but I also didn't really necessarily care about the film or really get into it until the third act kicked in, which is basically when all the crazy Cenobite stuff starts to happen. The movie itself follows Riley, played by Odessa Azane. I'm probably saying that wrong. She's basically an addict. She lives with her brother and his boyfriend, and she's constantly basically disappointing him. They keep getting into fights, and then eventually her and her friend Trevor break in to a shipping yard one night, and they find the puzzle box, and thus everything starts to happen. Her brother goes missing, and then it becomes a journey of her solving the puzzle box and basically inviting Pinhead and the Cenobites into her life in order to try and find and save her brother. And that's the general plot of Hellraiser. The cast itself, about halfway through the film, I was basically, and it's going to be very close to something I'm going to say in a review for another film on another video here shortly, I didn't care about these characters. I didn't like these characters. I didn't care about their well-being or whether they're going to live and die. And to me, that's a big staple point in horror films. If you don't care about the final girl, or if you don't care about at least the cast surrounding her, and they're just like, oh, I can't wait for these people to die, or I don't like watching these characters on screen, then I think the writing of a horror film is failing. Because if you don't care about any of these characters, then you're just rooting for the killer. And then at that point, if the killer dies at the end of the movie, then you're just kind of screwed both ways. You have to give a shit about the final girl and at least one, if not all, the friends that are potentially going to die along the way. So that way, when their deaths happen, there is some emotional weight to it. Not saying that you're going to be like upset or crying, but at least go, oh man, not that guy or not that girl, I like them. And if you don't have that, then you're just watching a movie and there's just no weight to it. You're just kind of sitting there watching it, blindly. And that's what it felt like for the first half of the film. But eventually, we get into this one location, which I'm not going to say for spoiler reasons, and then you started to kind of build these characters up. You started to build their friendship. You started to build some actual character development with these people, and you actually started to give a crap about them a little bit more. And then we get to an inevitable twist in the film, and then I was like, oh, am I actually starting to enjoy this film? And the answer is yes, I was actually starting to enjoy the film. I thought the actress who took over for Pinhead, I think they're calling her the priest in this, but I mean everyone knows Pinhead is Pinhead. I thought she did a solid job. I didn't dislike her. I know a lot of people are pissed that Pinhead turned into a woman this time around. I didn't give a crap. I thought she did a solid job all throughout. I think the rest of the Cenobites, I think they all looked good. The problem is that some of them were constantly in very, very dark lighting through most of it, so you don't really get to get a good look at them outside of like one or two. And that's another thing with horror films. If you want us to see what these guys look like, you gotta put them in the light so we can get a good look. And you only get brief glimpses here and there. The gore factor is obviously there. It's a Hellraiser movie, and that's one of the biggest things with Hellraiser is, gore and brutality and all that kind of stuff. So if you want that from a Hellraiser movie, you're going to get that here. But at the end of the day, it's fine. Like I said, I'm not a Hellraiser fan. Now, if I was a regular Hellraiser fan or I was with the whole, mythology of it and stuff like that, would I like this movie more? Possibly, but I also don't know the mythology of it, so this could either be going completely against the mythology of the previous films, or it could be going right on path with it, which I think based off of reviews that I've seen so far, I think it's actually elevating the past stuff instead of deterring from it. So in terms of that, I think it's doing its job, but for me, because I don't know it, it was okay. It was great. It's not something I'd rewatch. The cast was fine. Like I said, it's just not my cup of tea. But I wouldn't deter you from watching it. If you're a fan of the Hellraiser franchise, I think you guys are going to enjoy this film. It's just not my kind of horror movie that I like. So for my score, I'm going to give Hellraiser a 58, but that's a very 58% because it's not my kind of film, so obviously I'm not going to score it nearly as high. But the average Hellraiser fan might elevate that about 20 points. Who knows? But like I said, if you're a Hellraiser fan, check it out on Hulu. If you're not, don't go out of your way to check this out. I don't think it's going to do anything to sway you to being a Hellraiser fan. But that's just my opinion on that. Going to our final film of this review roundup, we're going to go back to Netflix for Curse of Bridge Hollow. This is basically kind of like a family Halloween film, not Hubie Halloween, thank God. But basically this follows a teenage girl who accidentally releases an ancient and mischievous spirit on Halloween, which causes all the decorations to come to life and wreak havoc, and she must team up with the last person she'd want to in order to save her town, her father. Cast-wise is kind of the reason why I wanted to check this movie out. You got Marlon Wayans, who plays the father, Howard Gordon. He's a science teacher, and he has something that happened to him in his past that makes him hate everything Halloween, and if it's not scientific, or if it doesn't have a scientific approach to it, then it's nonsense to him. He wants none of it. He doesn't want to talk about it or anything in his house. And then you got Priya Ferguson, which many people will know her from Stranger Things. And I love her in Stranger Things. I think she was a great addition to the cast, and I think season 3 is when I think they actually gave her like a legit character plot. And she has grown as a top-tier character in that series since then. So now actually getting to see her in an actual film without the Stranger Things cast around her was something I really wanted to see. Kelly Rowland plays their mother, who really doesn't give a whole lot to do in this actual film. You got John Michael Higgins, you got Rob Riggle, you got Laura Lapkus, you got Nia Vardalos, who I haven't seen in anything in a long, long time. And then you got two young actresses that I've seen in other things, basically TV shows. You got Abby Monteiri, who maybe people know from Doom Patrol, and you got Holly J. Barnett, who people will know from Life in Pieces. So it was actually nice to see those two again, because I haven't seen them in a very long time. But the plot itself, this whole curse that awakens all the Halloween decorations, it's one of those things, like, it's a very Disney, it's not a Disney film, but it's a very, like, I was telling this to Brian, because Brian was like, I don't know if I want to watch it. I said, it's very much like what Hocus Pocus was when it came out in '93. It's a harmless family Halloween film that's, at least with Hocus Pocus, ended up turning into this huge overreacted cult film that everyone lives and dies by, which Curse of Bridge Hollow is not going to be that. But it's a harmless Halloween film. Marlon Wayans is not going full Marlon Wayans, at least not in the first half anyway. I think he does a solid job playing Howard Gordon, playing this kind of, stick up the ass kind of character until all this crazy stuff starts happening, and then you start to see Marlon Wayans come out. I think Priya does a great job as Sydney, and I think the rest of the cast does their job well in this film. I think Laura Lapkus, she does put on this really thick Boston accent, and no one else in the town is doing this accent, so she does kind of feel like she's in the wrong kind of film. She's in the wrong movie, basically. I like her as an actor. I think she's a funny comedian, but when she's in this town and she's the only one with this thick Boston accent and no one else is talking that way, everyone else is just talking normal, she sticks out like a sore thumb, and not in a good way. In terms of the actual plot with the decorations coming to life, I loved it. I thought it was very unique. I thought it was great. It added some different elements. You have zombies, killer clowns, you got a giant spider. Of course, two things that terrify me are clowns and spiders, and I had to deal with both of those in this movie. But, nonetheless, it was a fun watch. It's not a great film. It's not a movie that's going to be like, oh my god, you must watch this movie. But, for what it was, it's a harmless family Halloween film, which, much like one of my surprise films of last year, Nightbooks is. It's got some horror elements, it's got some scary elements that might scare some younger children, but overall, it's a fun time if you can kind of just enjoy it for what it is, which is a, like I said, harmless Halloween family film. Like I said, I had fun watching it. It's 90 minutes, it's quick, it's breezy, and like I said, there's nothing outright bad in this movie, except for maybe Laura Lapkus' Boston accent, but even then, that's not done so over the top to the point where you're just like, ugh, the whole way through. It's just when she starts talking, you're like, that's a choice. It's not a good choice, but it's a choice, and I can respect that. Overall, I think if you guys just want to watch a harmless Halloween film that's not super bloody or anything like that, and just have some kind of fun, maybe turn your brain off a little bit and just enjoy what you're watching, and if you're if you're a fan of Priya Ferguson and Marlon Wayans, then I think this is worth checking out. I'm actually going to give Curse of Bridge Hollow a 78%. Like I said, check it out if you want. If you're a big horror fan and you just want to watch something light and not bloody, Curse of Bridge Hollow is definitely the watch for you. I hope you guys enjoyed all these reviews. If you guys did, go and hit that like, share, and subscribe button to the channel so you guys stay up to date with all the latest videos pop up on the Movie Crusaders. And of course, look at the follow us on all the social media outlets you see below. Coming up next, we have reviews for Rosalind, Smile, Amsterdam, and Halloween Ends. As well, in the next couple weeks, Brian, Michaels, and myself will be back to do a season finale show of She-Hulk, House of the Dragon, and Rings of Power. We're basically just waiting for House of the Dragon to end now that She-Hulk and Rings of Power are over, so we can talk about the whole seasons as a whole for all three films. So once House of the Dragon ends, we will shoot that video. And we got many more movies. Black Adam comes out next week. We got a lot of movies coming out now, so a lot more reviews, hence why I had to do a mass review for all 5 of these movies on one video instead of doing 9 individual videos. But we got plenty to check out. As long as my cough goes away, I will keep giving you as much as I can. But until next time, in case I don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, and good night, Movie Crusaders.
You're still here. It's over. Go home.